We're going to talk a bit more now about a leaked memo suggesting the government has no overall plan for Brexit. We're joined by the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Tim Farron, who's in Westminster, as you see. Tim Farron, a very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but out of lobby in the past couple of minutes has come these lines from the Prime Minister's spokesperson. I'll tell you what they're saying, because it might be quite germane to what you're about to tell us. Prime Minister's spokesperson says, it's the memo. It's an unsolicited document that has nothing to do with the government, not produced by government, not working for government. Struggle to understand why a memo with no credence makes front-page news. And they go on to say the memo author, quote, has not been inside Number 10 or engaged with Number 10 since the PM has been in government. It has not been distributed widely across government. It does not seem as if this is a form touting for business. No one at Number 10 knew of the existence of the memo. This is an unsolicited document put together by a company outside of government. Why are we even talking about it?
Well, look, the journalists behind the story absolutely stand by their sources, but I kind of think if I was Number 10, if I was the Prime Minister and I was accused of not having a plan, rather than coming up with a rather long-winded statement, the one like you just read out just then, I would instead come up with a plan and demonstrate that I had one. And the very fact that they haven't described what their plan is a reminder they haven't got a plan. Well, and yeah, that is absolutely unforgivable in many respects. You know that the referendum which took place at the end of June, several weeks and months ago now, the fact the government is not any clearer as to where it wants to take our country and isn't even bothered about asking the British people the direction in which it wants to go is deeply concerning, particularly for business, but for others too.
Maybe they could really roll up their sleeves and crack on with a plan if they could get on with invoking Article 50, but some people won't let them.
No, I mean, my view is that the British Parliament should be asked by Parliament, by the government to invoke Article 50, but the British people should have their say on the outcome. And it seems to me very, very wrong that we're in the middle of a process now that will end, as things stand, with our government doing a stitch-up with Brussels civil servants and imposing a deal on the British people without asking them. The will of the people must prevail. That means their vote in June matters, but it means that they must also be consulted on the terms of the deal at the end of this process. To do otherwise is to snub the British people.
So, I mean, you clearly, you make clear you want a second referendum. You've made that abundantly clear. How many of you're a Cumbrian MP where 5 out of 6 council areas voted, in certain places, pretty emphatically for Brexit. What do your local constituents make of your position as increasingly the standard bearer for a second referendum?
Well, 2 things. First of all, my constituency is the 1 out of 6 that voted Remain. And secondly, not a single person in this country voted to leave, for example, the single market. Not a single person in this country gave their endorsement of the plan that none of us know what it is yet. And that's why we're having this discussion in the first place.
You know why? It's a negotiation, isn't it? I mean, we can't tie the Prime Minister's hands. I mean, if the Prime Minister goes to the 27 other member nations and says, you know what we want, you know what our red lines are, that's not much of a negotiating position, is it?
Well, actually, triggering Article 50 before you've got any kind of clue either is also jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute on your back. It's the most colossally stupid way of conducting any kind of negotiations, and that would go for anybody who was committed to leave as well. If you wanted to leave the European Union, you know, absolutely divesting yourself of any cards whatsoever is a pretty daft thing to do. But I'm talking about not just doing the wise thing for Britain and the best thing for Britain, but actually letting the British people be central. In all of this, it seems to me the government has taken a vote in June and assumed that that is an endorsement of any crazy thing that they come up with, a stitch-up with Brussels bureaucrats. And that is the irony, that people like Boris Johnson and others, who are so supposedly in favour of Britain taking back control, are now handing control over to Brussels bureaucrats, because it'll be those bureaucrats and our government who stitch up a deal that will be imposed on the British people. And whether you voted Leave or Remain, we should be angry at our government imposing upon us a deal that absolutely none of us voted for.
How widely shared in Parliament is your view that a second referendum is necessary, given that Labour has come out and said that Article 50 must stick, that the will of the British people needs to be observed. And, you know, are you getting support from the Tory backbenchers? How wide is it?
Semantic point first. This is not a second referendum. This is not a rerun of the June referendum. We accept that result. This is a first referendum on the terms of the deal.
I think if you stop people on the streets, and it's a second referendum, isn't it? They would feel it's a second referendum.
No, it's about what's... Because that was a vote on departure. This is a vote on destination, and they are equally important, and they're not the same. I'm sorry if that sounds, you know, nitpicky, but I think it's absolutely crucial. Are there other people in Parliament who agree with us? Yeah. Well, you're going to ask them. It's rather disappointing this morning to hear John McDonnell saying...
part of the narrative that came out of the Brexit camp was that, look around, look at Denmark, look at France, look at other parts of Europe, look at Ireland, where when people gave an answer to the government that the bureaucrats didn't want to hear the first time, they went back to them a second or even a third time.
Well, we have general elections, roughly speaking, every 5 years. I mean, the notion that you somehow never, ever talk about an issue once again, once there's been any kind of a discussion about it, is ridiculous. I mean, you know, if in any democracy, it's important that you have the grace to accept the result that's gone by, win or lose, but also that you then move it on. We're not now talking about whether we do or don't leave the European Union so much. That is the decision that was taken in June. What we are talking about is what kind of relationship we have with Europe. Now, Stephen Phillips, Conservative MP who resigned just a week or so ago, is a reminder, as somebody who actively campaigned and voted for leave, but resigned from Parliament because he believes we should stay in the single market, and he never voted for that departure. It's a reminder that there are millions of people out there who voted leave, but who disagree with the hard Brexit exit from the single market the government is currently planning. And I can't tell you how many millions, and neither can you. And that's why the British people should be central to all this. It's no good journalists and politicians arguing the toss about what kind of relationship with Europe we should have now, because that's not been voted on by anybody. It's up to the British people. Let them decide. That's why we call for a referendum on the terms of the deal.
OK. Tim Farron, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.